Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 2025-2026 Attorney Information and Training Session. I'm Tiffany Watson, and I'm here with Miss Simone Shinton. And this is our CBA Edward J. Lewis II, Lawyers in the Classroom Program Attorney Information Session. And I'm looking forward to connecting with all of you. For today's session, we will do welcome and introductions. Our mission and vision, we'll talk about the history and programming. We'll look into roles in the program. We'll talk about frequently asked questions, key program components. We're going to do an LIC lesson, next steps, and important information on save the date, and questions, of course. We'll definitely have opportunities for you all to ask questions. So, again, my name is Tiffany Watson. I am a 15-year educator, former elementary and middle school, high school teacher. I also was a school administrator, and I've been directing this program, that is the Lawyers in the Classroom program, for more than 7 years. Over that tenure, I've brought on about 24 schools to this programming. And many of you probably already know me because I know there are some who've been a part of this program for a while, but I'm a very passionate educator and very passionate about children, and I'm a child advocate. And this is Miss Simone Shinton, owner of the law offices of Simone Shinton. She's been practicing for 9 years, and she is the survivor's lawyer, serves in the sexual abuse survivor category, and she has been a part of Lawyers in the Classroom for 6 years, and obviously a very passionate volunteer and child advocate as well.
Yeah, I actually started my career out at Greenberg Traurig, which I mentioned because they're such a great law firm that supports this and has supported the Lawyers in the Classroom program for quite some time. I was in the defense world for 7 years and had a really good experience with this being a meaningful way to team build within your firm and really demonstrate leadership when you're an associate on at a medium or large size law firm. And then I switched to the plaintiff side, and now I opened my own firm this year. So I'm on my ninth life in 9 years, it feels like. But truly, whatever kind of practice of law you're living in, there's a way this program can work for you.
Thank you. Absolutely. So, our mission and vision, which is very important, the Chicago Bar Association's 501(c)(3, Media and Civic Education Inc., is the name of our actual nonprofit, obviously, that's underneath the CBA, and that supports the Edward J. Lewis II Lawyers in the Classroom program. Um, our mission for our program and for our organization is to engage Chicago area students through interactive civic education programming. Let me see, sorry, using attorney volunteers that provide relatable real world understanding of how the Constitution and legal system shape the rights and responsibilities of citizens. Um, our vision, of course, is a future where every Chicago area student is empowered with the knowledge, confidence, and analytical skills to understand and uphold their constitutional rights and responsibilities, inspiring them to actively participate in shaping our democracy. So we are taking our role very seriously. I wanted to also just draw your attention to our website, the CBA website, which has the history and all of our information. You also can look about becoming a volunteer. It gives you more information here. And more FAQs that we're kind of going to go over, which has our mission and vision also. So I just wanted to direct your attention to that. In addition to our Give Butter site, which also has our mission and vision and carries information and fundraising information, our board members, um, so that you're aware of all the information that is available to you um, as being a part of this program. Our history. So the Chicago Bar's Edward J. Lewis Lawyers in the Classroom program, it actually originated with Constitutional Rights Foundation Chicago since 1974 for more than 30 years. It was renamed for Edward J. Lewis II in 2007. He was a very dedicated lawyer at Jenner and Block, and he actually corralled 100 attorneys at his firm and they visited Pickard Elementary in Chicago. Um, and since then, that was the early 1990s. The program has taken off, flourished. It reaches 5,000 students across 61 schools. This year, we brought on an additional 7 schools. Um, and it engages 600 attorneys and law student volunteers. We do work with Northwestern as well as DePaul. And we deliver about 20 lessons of constitutional curriculum tailored to second through 10th grade. Obviously, with us focusing on the Constitution, we bring real world law into classrooms with attorneys making constitutional principles come alive. So that's the greatest thing about this program, teaching students in an interactive lesson, and also helping them understand the Constitution and having the Constitution come alive. So ultimately, our program fosters civic literacy, critical thinking, which is my favorite part as a former English teacher, and leadership skills in Chicago area youth. So there are 4 roles in this program. There's the manager director, the managing director role, the attorney team lead role, the attorney volunteer role, and then of course we have the teacher partner role. And they all serve great purposes, and it helps. All of these roles help with the partnership as it relates to lawyers in the classroom. So, my role as managing director, I recruit and support attorney volunteers for this program, the Lawyers in the Classroom program. I help facilitate connections um, by introducing attorneys and teachers via email, initiating classroom visit processes. And I also, it's not mentioned here, but I also do recruit schools, and I coordinate visits. Um, Providing the curriculum materials and clear instructions to both partners, that being the attorney volunteers as well as the teacher volunteer. I ensure all attorneys visiting CPS schools complete the CPS volunteer application form. I'm often going to be in your inbox reminding you about reflection forms. So students have to complete student reflection forms, but also teachers and attorneys have to complete reflection forms after their visit. So I'm going to be following up to ensure that you all complete those reflection forms. I do attend classroom visits, take pictures. I'd like to see the lesson in action. I do follow up with attorneys and teachers to ensure that we continue and sustain our partnership. In this particular position today, I like to model effective teaching methods and share classroom engagement strategies with attorneys, just to help the process and the in-person visits feel, you know, very easy. So that's my role. So then we have the attorney team lead. This is usually an attorney that is leading a group of attorneys at their firm. So, for example, Simone was an attorney team lead and is an attorney team lead at her new firm, but she served with Goldman Ismail as well, and was the attorney team lead. So she recruited volunteers, gathered names of interested attorneys within her firm who wished to participate in the Lawyers in the Classroom program. And then she would promote the training, which is what we're doing today, ensuring that all attorney volunteers complete that training, confirm and oversee kind of that they all submit their CPS volunteer application form, help with coordinating the scheduling. Obviously, I work with coordinating, but with the attorney team lead being in the office, they would be working with their volunteers, so that we can solidify dates and times that they would be visiting their schools. Any communication changes that happen with the team, the attorney team lead would definitely share that with me. And then that support accountability piece, ensuring that all attorneys complete the reflection process. So, as I mentioned, students and attorneys and teachers have to complete a reflection form after each of their visits, which we'll discuss later in this presentation. But um, the attorney team leads help support that process. And now the attorney volunteer. So many of you have already received, well, all of you should have received an email that said to ask you to complete the CPS application form. So Any person, any attorney who is visiting a CPS school, they have to complete it. The request is that attorney volunteers complete the CPS application form at least 2 weeks before their visit, just to make sure that the process gets completed and on the CPS's end, everything is finalized. The attorney volunteer also confirms 3 visit dates with their partner teacher, and we have a discussion about which dates work for you once you've been partnered with your school. Um, Another piece of being an attorney volunteer is reviewing the full LIC curriculum. We have 20 lessons total to familiarize yourself with. So it's a lot, but just looking over the curriculum is great for you to understand kind of expectations. Um, and then selecting the lawyers in the classroom lessons for your visits. That's also part of being the attorney volunteer. So you would review the curriculum, and based on your grade level, you would select the lessons. Um, and then review that lesson. Once you are scheduled, review the lesson for each visit prior to the day of the lawyers in the classroom visit. So it's very good not to do it the day of your visit, but prior to, like actually knowing what you'll be teaching, and how you'll be teaching the lesson. That is reading over the procedure, um, and making sure that you're well aware of kind of what will be happening in the classroom. Um, Also, making copies. So when you're paired with your school, you'll find out the class sizes of the class or classes that you'll be visiting at your partner school. Those class sizes equate to the amount of handouts that you'll be providing for the students. So it's important for you to make the appropriate, measures to make the copies for the handouts, the copies for the students, so that when you visit your school, you have all of the handouts handy for the students. Excuse me. Um, and then also maintaining neutrality. Um, this program focuses on constitutional rights and has no political opinions at all. So, keeping personal and political opinions or biases outside of the classroom and focusing on administering the lessons, teaching the students their rights, and focusing on making sure that they know the Constitution and how it applies to their life. So that's ultimately the goal when you serve as an attorney volunteer. So during the visit, the attorney volunteer would their first time visiting. I know there's a lot of new attorney volunteers that have joined this session today. And so I wanted to emphasize that going into the classroom, introducing yourself, your practice area, and your experience during the first visit is really important. You want to build the relationship with the students, and do that, over the course of a short period of time. So I put 10 minutes, but 8 to 10 minutes would be good, or less. But nevertheless, definitely introducing yourself and sharing your practice area, maybe explaining it, because many students only know criminal law. And so it's important to kind of share that there are many areas, because this also kind of helps helps students understand their opportunities that are available. And then also, um, the attorney volunteer partners with the teacher. So that helps with student engagement. So when you're connected to your partner school and partner teacher, it's good to have conversations prior to your visit with the partner teacher about the lesson, about the students, about grouping if the lesson requires that. Um, be sure that students understand instructions. A lot of times, writing things on the board is really important for clarity. So if you give students a number of instructions based on what the lesson is calling for, it's best to write them on the board. Have students read the instructions aloud. So I can't emphasize this enough in terms of limiting the reading yourself. It's important that you delegate reading to the students. They need to be reading so that they know what's going on. If you read everything, they'll tune out. So, reading the instructions and reading the actual case or the situation. So, having the students read the case and the instructions, all of it, because that's when they're going to engage in what the lesson is. So that's really important. I can't stress that enough. If you want to introduce yourself, share um, share your background, but then delegate who should read and who's going to read the activity. They should be doing the majority of the talking in this in your lesson. Also, fostering inclusivity by giving all students who raise their hands a chance to speak. So, if you see four students raising their hands, four students should have the opportunity to comment on or provide a response or answer to whatever the question or situation is going on in the classroom. I think I kind of spoke about not talking longer than when the child's age, but making sure to focus on, keeping your comments short, but making sure students understand the instructions. So it's a happy medium that you have to take. Um, so during the visit, um, if the lesson calls for movement and group dialogue, allow it. Um, so coordinate with the teacher for student grouping. Use the lessons procedure outlined in the LIC lesson to teach the lesson. Um, if we stay on course, we can make our lesson target. So I want to show you very briefly the an example of a lesson, and that's our no electronic devices lesson. So just you have targets at the beginning here, as you can see, no electronic devices. This is our seventh, eighth grade, and ninth and 10th grade lesson that can be used in those classrooms. You have objectives, that you want the students to compare. I wanted to share that, you'll see the actual PDF of the Lawyers in the Classroom curriculum, and you'll see how it has lesson targets, objectives, and it'll have a procedure. Um, it'll say group the students or have five students go to the board. Follow that procedure is ultimately what I'm suggesting. Encourage students to think and consider multiple perspectives and engage with complex conversations, complex questions, I'm sorry, that may not have simple answers. So, since you are an attorney and you have had real world experience in the courtroom or as an attorney, some may not work in a courtroom, obviously, but be sure to explain your real world examples that you bring into the lesson because that's always helpful. Real world examples. That's another piece of this program that helps students really understand and connect to their constitutional rights and the Constitution overall. But I can't emphasize more that following the lessons procedure is really important to reaching the targets and the objectives of the lesson. Enjoy yourself. Um, it's a really fun opportunity, and I hope you all enjoy it. The positive energy that you bring into the classroom, the students will feel it right away. Any energy that you bring into the classroom, they're going to feel it. So it's important that it's positive. And everything that you give them, they will give you back. So if you're really energetic and you're excited about sharing the lesson, excited about, which I'm sure all of you are, excited about informing students of their constitutional rights, teaching a particular lesson, they too will feel that and be excited to learn and then also share it with their community, with their parents. They're going to go home and tell their families about what they learned. And that's what we want. That's what we want. And so then after the lesson, um, the attorney is to complete a attorney reflection form to ensure that students And then making sure that students complete their reflection form. Here's what the attorney reflection form looks like. It's very brief and asks you what you taught, asks you for your teacher partner, school name, and then examples of how the lesson went, how successful the lesson went, just to get a gauge of what the students may have learned from your vantage point and how they engaged with the lesson. We obviously need this information to help help the program continue, sustain, and flourish the program as it continues. So it's really important that the reflection form is completed. And so the teacher partner, their role is to notify and remind the school's main office that you'll be visiting. They too review the lesson. That's when you all come together and you can discuss the lessons prior to you visiting the classroom. You can also look to them to help with grouping the students, because they may know, "Oh, this group of kids can't sit together because they talk," or they may know, they know the dynamics of their classroom. So it's going to be great for you to talk with them prior to going into the classroom, especially if there's a portion of the lesson that requires groups or any type of partner work. um, the teacher also during the visit can assist with classroom management, maybe quieting down the students or getting them focused if that's necessary. And then they too have to complete a teacher reflection form. And that's this. Um, and then they will send their completed student reflection forms in the mail to me. So that's the other thing. So once the students have completed their reflection forms, um, those reflection forms would stay with the teacher. The teacher then mails those or scans them and sends them to me. So that is the role of the partner teacher. So here's some frequently asked questions. Our attorneys classroom speakers. There's a lot of times I've heard various people mention that being a part of this program makes you a speaker. And I really want to emphasize that we're really there to teach. You all have the expertise, the legal knowledge, and the civic knowledge to teach constitutional rights to students from second through 10th grade. And that's what you're doing. You're teaching, and you're connecting them to the law, helping them understand how it applies to their life. And so that's really important to note. Many of you did sign up as solo attorney volunteers, so you do know you can participate in this program by yourself. But if you have a team of attorneys, that's also very exciting. So if you came in by yourself and want to bring in more attorneys, that's also something you can do. Um, why do the students have to complete the student reflection form? I think I kind of touched on this a bit, but it helps us with evaluating the program. So just like the attorney and the teacher reflection forms, the students, we do need to get their feedback. So I know sometimes at the end, it's kind of a rush. Some of you may know, some of you are new to this program, but with what you have to cover over an hour long period, usually with students, it does kind of feel like a lot. And in some cases, you're able to leave the student reflection forms with the teacher and they can complete it with the students, right after. um, and so that's something that I wanted to share. But all reflection forms are really important, students' reflection forms especially. And you can always contact me with any questions over this school year, as you're being placed in your school, or if you have any additional questions in general. I'm always available for any questions or feedback. And so, again, I mentioned that the CPS volunteer application process is really important to this program. We have been a partner for obviously 40 years. And so we want to continue our partnership with CPS. And to do so, all of our volunteers have to complete the application. And that application is here. Um, Many of you have already completed it because I sent it to those who registered. Those of you who are returning know this process quite well, but you have to submit your application, which actually looks like this. And, it asks your information. It gives you the opportunity to share your first and last name, middle name, and all of that. It's important that for school organization, you would select lawyers in the classroom. As you can see, it's right here. You would select that for under the school drop down. Don't select your partner school or the school you might want to be partnered with. It's really important to select lawyers in the classroom because I would be approving your volunteer application so that it can go straight back to the CPS folks and they can approve it on their end. It's also really important that you click on the volunteer type of level 2. Level 2 means that you don't have regular interactions with the students. So you're not a level 1 volunteer, you are a level 2 volunteer, because you only visit the classroom 3 times over the course of 9 months, the school year. So it's really important that you select level 2 in the application. Again, many of you have already completed this, but if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me at any point. Now, our curriculum, our key program components. I mentioned there are 20 lessons, and this is just kind of a breakdown of the lessons. We have 3 lessons at the second through third grade level, 4 at the fourth through sixth. We have 13 at the seventh and eighth grade level, which also equates to the ninth and 10th grade level. And these are the topics that we cover. Um, we cover real cases, the Breonna Taylor case. We cover voting rights and the Wisconsin versus Yoder case, the Tinker v. Des Moines case. They look at jury selection, voir dire. So it's a pretty robust curriculum that I'm very proud of and have been proud of for many years. So administration for this 2025-2026 school year. Um, so the scheduling process for attorney volunteers. School teacher partners, I've been in contact with them over the last month about providing their scheduling information. So they provide me the grade levels, class times, and class sizes, and their available dates for you guys to visit. And that is when I have been reaching out to returning teams and giving that scheduling information to those teams who are already partnered. For example, Kirkland and Ellis attorneys are partnered with Armstrong Elementary. Their teacher has already provided their scheduling information, so I've sent it to that attorney team lead, and we're working to solidify dates. Many of you probably already know this if I've been in contact with you about your partner teacher, partner school. But then there are a list of schools that have openings and availabilities, and a few of these are new schools that came to the program. And so this is the list of schools that are available. So we have William Prescott Elementary, and I've provided here the classes that the teacher wants visited. So that means they have, for example, the William Prescott Elementary School. The teacher is Miss Crystal Hall. She teaches fifth grade. She has 2 classes that she wants visited this school year. And again, we ask that you go to those 2 classes 3 times. So she has a 950 and a 1050, and they have 28 students. So each of these classes will be visited 3 times over this school year. Um, so this list of schools will be provided for you. We have Waters Elementary, which has several classes to visit. We have James B. McPherson Elementary, Noble Elementary, Keller Regional Gifted Center, Courtney Language Arts Center, Mitchell Elementary, Carson Elementary, Murphy Elementary. And again, each of these classes are broken down so you see the time for each of the classes, the amount of students, the teacher, the grade level, and you have the dates that are available for you to visit. This doesn't mean that you can't work out other dates if none of these work, but it's important to note that these are the dates that the teacher provided, that work best for them. Then we have Mollison Elementary and Thorpe, which is a longtime partner. So we have a number of schools partners that um, are here available for you to be partnered with. So for individual volunteers, you would receive this list of schools, and I'll be providing that following this presentation. Um, as you can see, it had the available dates. It had all of the information you need to decide, including the address. If it's close to your job close to your home, you may decide to select that school. Um, so you'll receive the list of schools. You'll select the top three partner schools that you'd like to visit. I will place you at one of those schools, and I'll connect you with your teacher partner, and we'll confirm the visit dates and details, and then send you the actual curriculum that ultimately solidifies your visit. Um, and again, that goes the same for individual volunteers. Um, you'll be given for returning individual volunteers, unless you've already been um, assigned to a school. You can look at that same partner school list and decide which schools you want to visit, and then I will place you according to your preferences. Um, and as I mentioned, I've already spoken to attorney teams, and they have been placed back with their original school partners. So that's ultimately the administration of the program, in which you see a list of schools, select which schools, classes you'd like to visit, and I coordinate those visits for you. And throughout the process, you can always reach out with any questions. So now, as we kind of wrap up, we're going to definitely go into an actual lesson, which is a free speech versus hate speech lesson. And I'm going to turn it over to Miss Simone Shinton so she can kind of review this lesson with you. It's one of our newer lessons I'm really proud of, which helps students really understand the difference between free and hate speech.
Hi, everyone. I'm 100% going to word vomit at you things that I learned along the way from the various classroom visits that I've done and from organizing the different teams that I've organized along the way. Tiffany mentioned there's a wide variety of topics for you to teach. I always recommend starting with something that will allow you to build a little bit more rapport with your classroom. If it's your first time in that school, first time with that teacher, first time with those students, you're really stepping into their world. And while they'll absolutely be super excited to have access to you, it helps to build a little bit of trust and of course know who your team is, know and prepare with your team. I always would have a meeting, even if it's just 30 minutes with whoever you're going to the school with, where you have all of the materials printed out and we just kind of walk through like, okay, what are you thinking about with these questions? Preparing for some questions that the students may ask. I think when I was first starting this, my biggest fear was that the kids were just going to stare at me and not engage at all. And that was almost never my experience. They're very engaged. They have very insightful questions. The kids of today are not at all what we were like in middle school and high school. They have access to Twitter and social media and the internet, and they're really conscious of what's going on in the world, and they absolutely are going to ask you about it. Which is not to say that you have to have a right or wrong answer to anything. The great thing about this program is, a major part of your job is really just to validate the fact that the kids are thinking like lawyers, right? So I hope and encourage that you get to a point where you want to take on something like the Breonna Taylor lesson. We were doing that in the classroom in 2020 and 2021, and it was extraordinarily fulfilling. The kids were super engaged. But don't feel like you're ever going to be in a position where you have to, one of the pieces of advice was to not get into your own biases, your own political opinions. You don't need to. The kids may very well ask you, well, why is it this way? And if you have a strong opinion of that it's wrong that it's this way, or it's right that this way, you feed the question back to the classroom, right? Of, well, why do you think that we do it this way? And maybe you can give the history, the inaccurate lineage of why the law started that way. But ultimately, your job is to validate and foster a conversation, which I found has been very easy to do with the kids. So free speech versus hate speech is a good place to start. I think it's a safe middle ground of the kids are excited to talk about it. We live in Chicago. There's protests outside virtually every month right now. So you can bank on the fact that the kids will have opinions and want to ask you about things. If we go to the next slide, this is for your own, in your meeting with your lawyer team of, okay, this is what our goal is today. But generally speaking, your goal is always going to be, in a perfect world, the kids are leaving with an understanding of what the law is, and they're also leaving feeling like, wow, but maybe someday I can be a lawyer if that's something that they're interested in, right? It's equally about teaching the civic rights that these students have, and also validating that they have the kind of skills and mindset to engage in this themselves if that's something that they want to pursue. So here you'd be teaching the First Amendment. um, these lesson plans are extraordinarily easy to follow if you print them out and just follow them as they are. Make sure you always click the links within the PowerPoint presentations and print those out as well. If you just print, the exact slides as they are and don't click through the links, you'll miss those. And the handouts are the most important pieces of the work, because that's where the students engage. And hold on, I want to quickly address a question that someone has. Yeah. So one of the questions, I'm a solo firm myself now. When I go, I'm not going to be going with a team of individuals. But the question is, how is this different when you've got one person versus a whole team? When I was at the law firm where I was leading this, I would often only be going. I would be the only lawyer in the room, and my other teammate would be in another room. You can absolutely do this by yourself. That's all the more reason why your relationship with the teacher is important, and why you benefit from respecting the fact that she knows the kids better than you do. I usually would get there a little bit early and ask her, like, would it be better if I call on kids by name, or if I let them popcorn? I'm a huge fan of popcorn, because again, the kids know each other better than I do. The kids know which one of the kids is likely to get the one who doesn't talk very often to want to talk, right? But this is completely and entirely doable with just one person in the room. In a perfect world, you've got two attorneys in each room. But honestly, I think I had more of a difficult time delegating between me and another lawyer. It was easier when it was just myself. The handouts do a lot of the work for you, which we'll pull it up when we get there. But usually you begin with kind of a quiz that allows you and the students to gauge what they do or don't know about the First Amendment. It'll ask some, you'll have someone read the language itself. You always begin with like just reading and learning what the law itself is. But of course, as we all know, the language of a statute, the language of the Constitution is not exactly modern day language that anyone would understand, nonetheless a child. So then we break down and we apply it to lots of different situations, which is where it gets really engaging for the kids. So you begin with a
Simone.
quiz. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. Just that I want to be clear, especially new volunteers. We're presenting this free speech versus hate speech lesson here on a slide. And for your knowledge, this slideshow was actually used during COVID, right? So we obviously couldn't go into classrooms, so we had to put the entire curriculum on these slides. And but now that we're post COVID, we don't usually use the slides. What we use is the actual lessons, the curriculum that will be provided as a PDF. So it's going to ask you to print out, the quick quiz. It's going to ask you to print out. You will see the handouts, and so the preference is that you use the handouts for the students because they need to see it in front of them versus on a screen, and they need to read the instructions and the activity in front of them. So for the purposes of this virtual presentation, we have have this here for you so you can kind of understand the role of the attorney, how the Socratic method would work with this lesson. But ultimately, you would be providing handouts, paper handouts, not using these slides. Just clearing that up.
Yeah, everything works better if they have something in front of them.
Yeah.
And usually the kids are going to be seated somewhat in, like threes, fours, fives of their desks being grouped together, and that tends to bode well for putting them in groups and having them collaborate, and deciding on one person to give their feedback to, and sharing as a group. There's a really fun lesson that I can't remember exactly what it's called, but that basically, like, one part of the room becomes prosecutors, the other part of the room become defense attorneys, one person's a judge. They eat that up. They're super engaged in it. So it's the way the room is set up in the classroom. Tiffany knows what she's doing. These handouts and the curriculum feed perfectly into it, whether you have one attorney or three attorneys in the room.
Yeah, and this is the quick quiz. And I think you were mentioning being a good witness lesson that you just referenced. And yeah, the students love that because they get to play roles and actually see from the perspective of the judge and all the different roles. So it's really helpful.
There's a question in the chat as well, which is, kind of what I was touching on, but the question in the chat is bringing up current events of what's going on with immigration. As I mentioned, it's highly likely that the kids are going to ask you real world questions about what's going on. And again, that's the kind of thing you want to discuss with your team before, of how are we going to answer these questions. And of course we don't we you don't want to go more into politics than you need to. I say that as someone who personally thinks that's somewhat impossible to do right now, very hard, right? So, bring things back to the lesson plan as much as you can, but validate the fact that they're engaging with the current times, right? And feed questions back to them of, and so why does that bother you, and what do we see in the law about how that seems like it's not consistent with what the law says, or how it is consistent, right? It's more about fostering a sort of collaborative discussion rather than talking at them, or picking a
Yes.
right or wrong view of something. Because it's that's the whole point, is that they're looking at the law and applying it to the real world and going, this doesn't seem like it adds up, or this does seem like it adds up, right? So I mean, don't
Absolutely.
you're not going to be able to prevent them from asking real world questions, and you don't want to, right? But don't feel like you need to have all the right answers, whatever that even means right now. Just foster a dialogue where you are kind of like a referee or an arbiter, and not th- giving a speech, if that makes sense. But it's difficult.
Absolutely.
So this is another handout that you would go to, and again, for every single letter, you're popcorning a different student. You're not, the worst thing you can do is just start reading the paper. That's probably, as Tiffany said, the one time you would absolutely lose them. They enjoy passing the reading back and forth to each other. And here you're still in the educational stage of what is free speech, what are the various elements and factors of whatever rule that you're teaching them that day, and they'll have that in front of them when they go on to applying it as well. So they'll learn the various components of free speech in their handout, and then you'll continue, and we're eventually going to get to a point where they're given hypotheticals. So you'll have a moment after you give them the opportunity to read what the law is, where you give a very brief explanation of why the law is that way, right? Or why those factors, elements, rules exist, and what the pros and cons of them are. And then soon after, you'll hand them I think it's on the next slide. You'll hand them, yeah, handout C. So usually, I don't think I've ever been in a room where I had to actually like move kids. Their seating chart has always, fed right into this kind of work, but usually they're always in groups of three or four already. And again, this is this alone will take you a good bit of time working through. I think I usually would have kids read two sentences, one sentence. In reality, they'll read as much as they're comfortable reading, and you'll get one or two kids that want to read a whole paragraph and one that want to read one sentence, and that's totally fine. So you have them
So
work through
true.
this, and this is, one of the longer pieces. And then you'll get the hypothetical situation. And again, you've got all of these handouts that you're keeping at the front. And as you work through each, don't just put a bunch of papers on their desk, hand them out as you get to it. So this handout is where they'll start to engage. You've got a hypothetical, and this is a grade 6 through 8 lesson, right, Tiffany?
It's a 7 through 10, because
Seven through eight.
this
Okay,
is,
yeah,
and there's some language in here too that's important to acknowledge when it comes to this lesson.
yeah.
So it's important to kind of, that's another piece. If this is a lesson that you would teach, you would definitely want to talk with the teacher about, some of the language that's used, some of the euphemisms, because students may or may not be familiar with certain language. And so talking with your teacher and seeing if, obviously you want to obviously see if it's comfortable for the students, but also, just making sure that this is something that, if there's any particular words or phrases that they need to know prior to the lesson, you might want to talk with the teacher about it.
Yeah, I always give the teacher just a courtesy heads up. I'll send them the lesson plan and say, hey, just so you know, like the hypothetical that we're working through deals with sensitive topics related to race. I've never had anyone have an issue with it, but I do know a lot of the teachers like to have just, a 5 minute, hey, do you guys remember the Charlottesville incident? No, I don't know about that. Oh, well, let me tell you about it, right? Tiffany's lesson plans do absolutely tackle real world scenarios. So, it's not something that we're shying away from, but I think the teachers respect having the opportunity to kind of transition the kids into dealing with that real world stuff before you show up, and it makes it even better for you. Yeah,
Absolutely.
here it would say organize the class into groups. There's some that are playing protesters, some that are counter protesters, and some that are the governor. They really get into this stuff. I usually have them as much as possible. I try to, there is inevitably 1 to 4 students who love talking and 1 to 4 who fully want to not exist in the room. And it'll be pretty apparent. So try your best to, even if there's, one student who is appointed the leader of a group, go out of your way to try and ask the other students, and they won't necessarily be wearing name tags. That's totally okay. You can still signal to them, call them by say what they're wearing or where they're sitting. No one's going to be offended that you don't know their name.
Absolutely. And sometimes the teachers will make name
Name tag.
tents.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's helpful. But sometimes they don't have the time, so it's cool for you to say, "I'm sorry, your name is,"
Yeah.
just kind of, because they want to know that you care about their name, and not only are you teaching civics and the Constitution, but you're building a relationship with
Mhm.
them over a course of a few months. I think.
Yeah. So you'll explain the roles that they'll play. They'll get super into it. It's the same one.
Okay.
But yeah, this is an example of there are some worksheets where they'll get like 12 different hypotheticals of like what exception does this apply to, right? And then there's others where they get a really long hypo, and a big debate will ensue of is this free speech or not, and why not, right? And you'll really just, okay, all right, but who can tell me why this should be hate speech, why this should be free speech? And they'll give their positions. Okay, now someone tell me the opposite, and then you'll have the judge or the governor decide, and it's a system that works really well for keeping the kids engaged.
Yeah, and they get to critically think. Like, they get to devise, in this particular lesson, get to devise a plan. So it's like they're creating. That's another great thing about this lesson and all of our lessons, because the students have the opportunity to not only understand the Constitution, understand a particular amendment more deeply, but also then use that knowledge to devise either a plan or create a new rule. Or so that's the part of the lesson that, in addition to other parts, but there's more critical thinking that is asked from the students.
Yeah, so afterwards you have them share what they've talked about. It's usually pretty clear when they're starting to wrap up that they've reached a decision, but I'll also just ask, I'll walk around the room and be like, have you guys reached a decision? Which one of you wants to share that? And just foster a collaborative conversation. I've never had any issues with the kids not respecting each other's opinions. They're usually pretty excited to argue with each other in a respectful way.
Yep, definitely.
And then the last handout, I think we can pull that up. Yeah, so it's one more thing you'd have them popcorn read, and you're giving them the closeout of what actually happened in real life here, so they have an idea of what the state of the current events is here, and that's, I would say, that's something you should always try to do if you can. Is if you're taking a if you take on Breonna Taylor, for example, like make sure you're actually familiar, generally speaking, with the basic facts of that case. Obviously, it's in the lesson plan, but the kinds of questions that you would expect people on your own team to have, run it down, like see what happened, right? So when a child is inevitably like, oh well, what happened here? You have an idea, and if you don't, be honest that you don't. That's totally fine. And then these final questions, I think, don't these are great, awesome starting points. And honestly, this is where you'll feel like you can have this class could be like 2 hours long. The kids are going to reveal the kinds of, broader philosophical, societal questions that they have throughout their discussion. They very well may guide the answers that they have, but come back up out of the lesson plan and foster that discussion of, like, is this the right way that we should do this? Why not? What issues do you see in us doing it this way? Again, that's that higher level, demonstrating to the kids that they have the skill set to be critical thinkers, to be lawyers if they want to.
Absolutely. So yeah, that concludes the lesson. Thank you, Simone, so much. Yeah. So there, I mean, this lesson is I would say a little longer than some of the others, because it's there's so many components, right? Helping the students understand, first of all, the First Amendment in general. What is free speech? What is hate speech? And then how does that apply to this actual real life event at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville? And then having them debrief and really understanding, not only what happened, but how do we look at this? How do we personally, but also how can we discuss this actual scheme of events that happened to our country? Um, and actually, again, going back to the whole focal point of the lesson, which is this hate speech? Does this constitute hate speech, or is it free speech? I mean, that's really the dialogue that the students are having as it relates to this lesson. And that's ultimately what the students are having across all of our curriculum. You want them to critically think about the Constitution and be able to support their claims. I mean, because that's actually the standards for across schools. Now, students have to critically think and then create, show their reasoning, and that's what you want them to do. And the more they do that in front of you, and you validate their reasoning, or help them to critically think, they'll be thinking like lawyers, like Simone said, and perhaps even go into law, which we would love. So for
One
next
thing
step,
I'll say,
oh,
don't like, I know Tiffany said this, but from the attorney perspective, it's so easy to forget the reflection forms because you get so deep into the lesson plan. Make sure you print them in advance, but like make sure you leave them, at least 5 minutes to, whether you put an alarm on your phone. I always ask the teacher, when do you need us done? She'll candidly will usually allow you to cut into some of her lesson plan to keep it going if it's good, but make sure you communicate up front when she needs you to be done, and leave 5 minutes for those reflection forms. It truly is, when this program is fundraising, when they're at events, being able to see the actual language of the kids and what they're getting out of it is really, really, really essential for us to know if this program is working, and for others who aren't a part of it to understand what it is that we're doing. There's not a lot of visibility between our teams of what we're experiencing in the classroom without these forms.
Yes.
So don't forget them. They really, really, really are important. Once the year is over, they're kind of like the one concrete thing that you have of what you've done. So just make sure that it's just as much a priority to you as the lesson plan is, because it's so very easy to get caught up in the moment and be like, ah, it's not as big. The work that we just did is the big deal, and it absolutely is. But this is the only proof that we had that the work happened.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Simone. That's really helpful. Um, yeah. And so with our next steps, again, I sent out the CPS volunteer application form for everyone to complete. I will be, reviewing everyone who submits it. And once you're scheduled with your school, I will be, making sure that everyone who's going into the classroom has submitted and has been approved by CPS. So that's important. I can resend the link and the information. I mentioned the matching of attorneys to school partners. I'm going to provide that list of schools for you to review, and you can select your preferences. Um, there are some teachers that are still submitting their scheduling information, so that's something to note. But you have 11 schools to select from at this moment. So that will be provided for you. If you could respond promptly, that would be really awesome. And so we can get you kind of solidified for the school year. And as always, I'm available, dare I say, day and night, but a lot. I'm available for you to reach out and ask questions via email. And you have my office phone as well. So feel free to reach out with any questions. So yeah, I think if there's no other questions, um, you can certainly reach out to me if anything comes up. Um, you will get the curriculum once you have solidified your visit with your partner school and teacher. I'm always open to any questions you have. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.